Zexal was the beginning of a new era for the franchise. This was where the second part of the franchise began, with the next few seasons mirroring the original 3. Therefore, Zexal took a lot of elements from the original Duel Monsters series and repackaged them into itself. Like 5Ds, it incorporated a new summoning method known as Xyz, which allowed players to summon a new type of monster, but pretty much ignored synchro monsters. This led to timeline splitting theories and the series taking place in different continuities. It's a headache to think about, especially with later seasons. I believe that the franchise is all in one timeline where there is a large time skip between them, so the world can reshape itself into a new setting for each new series. Makes more sense than overcomplicating it to the point of frustration. But let's begin with the story. The plot follows a kid called Yuma who, while dueling a guy named Shark, unlocks both a new type of card called the Number Monsters and a ghost called Astral that only he can see. Together they must track down every number card in order to restore Astral's memories and defeat the forces that plan to sow chaos throughout the universe. What I like about the plot of Zexal is that it is simple. It just builds onto itself as the series begins. The number hunting aspect of finding cards was an interesting spin on the Battle City tournament. The start of the series is slow, but that's by design as you get to learn about the characters and the world they live in. One of the problems with 5Ds was that its story was full focus for the first 60 episodes and it was very plot driven. It was good, but when the filler started, it screeched the series to a slow crawl. Zexal just worked better with the structure as it mixed the filler and the storyline with its character development. Heartland City, which is the main setting of the series, isn't as developed as other locations throughout the franchise such as Duel Academia or Neo Domino City, but I love the neon, colourful aesthetic. It works for the type of futuristic, colourful society that helps it stand apart from the previously mentioned Neo Domino while still having darkness beneath the surface. Zexal is split into 2 seasons with different villains that interconnect, including a tournament arc, because every season needs one of those except Brains. The final arc, known as the Barian Onslaught, is one of my favourite storylines in the franchise. It's right up there with the Darksiders arc, as well as including a group that opposed our heroes but ended in a different and more unique way. Don Falzon was there as well. I'll talk about him later. The tone of this show works as a slow build from happy and colourful to miserable and soul-crushing. My favourite. I know a lot of people don't like Yuma as a character due to him kind of being an idiot at first, but he did have character development that changed who he was. He is a 13-year-old kid, and I wasn't the smartest person who made the best decisions when I was his age. I mentioned at first because he started listening to Astral and became a stronger duelist over the progression of the series. He still made mistakes, because everyone makes mistakes. Hell, he started off as a bad duelist, unlike the previous 3 protagonists, which was a breath of fresh air. Wouldn't it be more relatable to a player of the game who starts off bad but improves with more duels and improvements to their deck, instead of someone who always wins? Astral is like a Tem, except in an advisory role. His memories were shattered into the 100 number cards which they need to collect, because card game anime, I should probably talk about the number monsters. They are Xyz monsters that possess people and can only be defeated by another number monster. That's not how that works in the real card game. I see the 2 working as a team better than Yugi and Atem, mainly due to their conflicting personalities and how they learn and grow from each other. With the previous example from Duel Monsters, most of the time it was Atem doing everything while Yuma and Astral worked together to win their battles. It's similar yet done in a better way. When Astral did possess Yuma fully, it was showcased as monstrous and something that should never be done again. These 2 characters tie into the main theme of Zexal, which is order and chaos. Yuma and Astral represent this with their personalities of hot-headed and calculative in a duel, along with the conflicting sides of the Astral and Barian worlds. One cannot exist without the other, and how they interact can cause change in people and worlds. Yuma and Astral have a fused form known as Zexal, which allows them to draw and edit cards. These are known as Shining Draw and Shining Evolution, and I don't really like them. Shonen power-ups don't really work in Yu-Gi-Oh! When the game follows a set of rules, so breaking them just feels cheap to me. Zexal had 3 different forms which look to be heavily inspired by the Super Saiyan transformations from Dragon Ball. Golden hair as a power-up is a cliche at this point. Personally, my favourite was the 3rd form, as it resembled an angel, especially with the wings reflecting the heaven and hell battle of both Astral and Barian worlds. If you want me to talk about a character I don't like, Kotori. She is Anzu, but worse. At least Anzu dueled and won. Kotori tag-dueled once and lost. Kotori just existed for Yuma to talk to as a female character, and she looks even worse coming after Aki, who was a great female duelist. Yuma's classmates aren't that interesting either. There's best friend Tetsuo, class representative Todoroki, Catwoman Kathy, and this bastard. They are pretty much just the characters that you think of from how I described them. They didn't have much growth and were just there to stand around in the background, kind of like Honda and Ryuji. Then there were the 2 rival characters, Ryoga or Shark and Kaito. Kaito is a more obvious reflection of Seto Kaiba from the original series, from his motivation to save his brother to his boss monster being a 3000 attack point dragon. He was a fascinating rival as he did something that no other has done, which was never lose to the protagonist. A point about previous rivals such as Seto and Jack has been that after they lose to the protagonist of their series, they are relegated to the sidelines. They never stood as tall as Atem or Yusei again, even when the series had them rematch. Kaito never lost to Yuma, and I applaud that, showing that Yuma still had to climb higher and challenge himself even after the series was over. Kaito also had connections to the villains of the first arc, the first being Tron, whose son mentored Kaito on dueling and was an amazing villain. Tron was this creepy, weird, childlike character who just demanded the attention of the viewer whenever he's on screen. This is what I look for in a good villain. One that demands that the audience watch whatever they do just to see what happens next. His family is a twisted mirror of itself, with his sons working as great characters individually, especially for as an insane duelist who sees his fans as his toys. There's something about villainous families that are just fascinating in fiction. A normal group of related people being twisted into a force of villainy that ruin lives. The other half of the villains from the first half of Zell was Dr. Faker, who is a lesser character than Tron. He's basically generic McBad guy who laughs evilly until he's defeated and suddenly turns good right afterwards. What's consistency in villains? Then there's Shark, and this is where I want to transition into talking about the Barians. Shark is revealed near the end of the story to be Nash, who is the leader of the Barians along with his sister. There were hints to this, but this still came as a great twist in terms of setting up friends against each other. Yuma and Shark started as enemies at school before building a camaraderie in battle and defeating the Barians before this wrench was thrown into the situation. The build-up of the story between the characters is the reason that Zell has the best pacing out of any Yu-Gi-Oh season. The other seasons before and after this just went along at a random pace without much care for building up characterization in the end. The filler in the original series, season 3 of GX Dragon on Forever, the second half of 5D, hell, the entirety of Brains. Zell spent time building its characters and used his time effectively rather than wasting it like a lot of other entries in this franchise. Unfortunately, it left a lot of the side characters I mentioned earlier in the dust. Kind of a double-edged sword, but I believe it was worth it to get this level of great storytelling between the main protagonists and antagonists. Point is, the series made me care about Shark and the other emperors of the Barian world. The rest of the Barians work as antagonists while having characterizations that bounce off each other well. Now, I have to talk about Vector, who is the biggest trickster in this franchise. He tricks Yuma by pretending to be his friend before betraying and using his friendship against him to defeat him in a duel. What a bastard. Can we have a villain like him again, please? Then there's also Don Thousand, who is exactly no one's favorite Yu-Gi-Oh character. He's the classic Sentai style villain who sits around letting their henchmen do all their dirty work before they decide to get off their fat asses to do something. I don't find him very compelling, honestly. The final duel between Yuma and Nash is one of my favorites in the franchise because it's more than just the end of the world. It's about a boy battling to save his friend who lost his comrades, but they still stand by him even though they're gone. Yu-Gi-Oh! Brains tried to redo this story with the character of I and the Ignis, but it doesn't work due to the lack of build-up and character. Brains barely looked to the Ignis as characters. They barely had any screen time, and suddenly the final arc and duel of that show is asking the audience to just care. It doesn't work in Brains, while in Zell it does because it dedicated its time to it. Especially with Yuma using Double or Nothing, which was a card he used to win his first duel against Shark at the beginning of the series to defeat Nash. It just comes full circle from the beginning. On that point, let's talk about the cards this season, starting with Xyz monsters. I actually quite enjoy them. They have a completely different style of play from Synchro monsters, instead stacking monsters with the same levels to be used for different abilities. I have played some decks based on Xyz summoning in the past, including one of my favourite archetypes, the Phantom Knights. The decks this season were mostly like 5Ds and supporting the new extra deck mechanic, with Yuma having one of the better decks for a protagonist. His deck focused towards summoning his ace, number 39 Hope or Utopia, and other previously mentioned number monsters. Weird when a protagonist deck is practically functional in this franchise. Finally, I want to comment on the production values of this season, which are the highest in the franchise. I love the bright colour palette that bleeds throughout the series. As someone who's sick of the dark and serious, I appreciate the design of this series. I like all the openings except the last one, Wonder Wings, which is just slow and boring, which clashes with the tone of the Barian Onslaught art. My favourite is the third opening, Soul Drive, which is a high energy rock song, debatably my favourite in the franchise. So in the end, Zell is a good season with flaws. A lot of the hatred for this season I blame on the dub, which was where 4Kids just threw up their hands about giving a crap about this franchise, but I watched it until the end and got a lot more out of it than others. I feel any series that comes out after a popular one like 5Ds is going to struggle, and for what it was, Zell wasn't that bad. It has problems with its consistency, but any series with over 100 episodes is going to hit that wall eventually. It has elements that stand above 5Ds for me, and I look forward to coming back to it again in the future. This video came out differently from how I originally thought it was going to be when I began this journey. Time and reflection can really make a difference on how you look at a series years after it came out. Truth be told, this used to be my least favourite season when it first came out. Now I appreciate it for what it did for the franchise in terms of storytelling and production. Next time, we will enter different dimensions in the glorious mess that is Arc 5. If you like this video, please give a like, subscribe, and hit that notification button for more content from yours truly. Also, follow me on Twitter through the link in the description. Cheers for watching. So the number cards are like stands.